Good morning, guys. So today's thought of the day, I wanted to talk about abundance techniques. I think for a lot of us, with what's going on right now, every time we go in a supermarket, prices are jacked up from the last time we've been there, from just a week ago. I don't know about you guys, but I keep going in and finding, from one week to the next week, everything's a little bit more. And with everything going on, I know that's got to be creating a strain on people's finances. So I figured I wanted to go ahead and talk about that. Mansoor and I was talking about going to the store, buying things, and he surprised me by doing a technique that Spirit had shared on, abundance training, and he was actually doing it. And it got me to really reflect back on when Women of the Forest taught me about abundance training. It was a point in time, I was much younger, didn't have a really savings, didn't, lived paycheck to paycheck, always scraping to try to get things paid, not very stable as far as going ahead and having an income. And I didn't know what abundance training was. She just came in and gave me the information and gave me the exercises. And it was very, very effective for me on learning to be able to create a savings, rework my framework on the way I thought about income, myself, what I have for purchasing power. And it was a really foundational for me lifting myself out of that state and becoming more responsible with money. And with what's going on today, I figured maybe we need, be good for a refresher and reminder, because without being conscious of what we're thinking and feeling in the moment, every time we go into the supermarket and the prices are higher and it's getting harder and harder to keep things afloat, it's very easy to have those things creep in and actually create more of a problem if we're not being mindful. So before I begin, one of the things I want to explain is Spirit's concept of illusion. It directly relates to the abundance thing, for manifestation. Spirit's always been clear that if you want to understand illusion, you understand how it works. And illusion is based on, I don't feel secure in the moment. I'm referencing past pain, that this happened previously, so I'm insecure about who and what I am in the moment. And so in order to deal with that, I project myself into the future where I'm going to fix myself. When I arrive at this point here in the future, I'm going to feel different, be different, which will make me secure. And so looking at it, what did we just do? Well, there's only the moment. That's usually their point. No matter where you are, your mind is present. So the past is the past. Emotions and thoughts are reactionary agents. Emotions don't know time. So even in the present, we still feel like we did from what happened previously. So we don't feel secure in the moment. So in the solution, we project into the future on how we're going to fix the problem or fix ourselves by being something different in the future. And the reason why I lay that foundation is because quite often manifestation techniques is all about envisioning what you're going to be in the future and trying that on for size. And it's one thing to step into the energy of creation, of being that in a sense of knowing. It's another thing to think it, which goes into pulling the past intentions that we don't realize we have. And it's not the same as stepping into the energy of knowing. And so our creations become illusions. And when we get to the future, the mirage fades, and what do we find? Either we're still insecure about the same subject or we're insecure about a different subject. We're never secure. And so we never get anything really fixed. Nothing really changes. It's, the mask of the drama may change, but the intention of the drama doesn't. And so that doesn't really go ahead and fix the problem. It doesn't really solve anything. And with talking to Mansoor and going over the exercises, reflecting on it, the nostalgia as far as what it was that she taught me during that time, I had an epiphany. And what I realized is what made the exercises work so well was that every single one of them was in the moment. The same moment that I'm experiencing the insecurity. The application wasn't in the future. It was in the moment that you're experiencing it. And think about it this way. First, let's simplify Spirit's perception of what illusion is. That the problem can only be solved in a moment. We have a very simple expression for that teaching. You put one foot in the past, one foot in the future, and you're crapping all over the present. Very earthy way of breaking that teaching down. The second thing is that it takes 28 days to form a habit. Within 28 days, the mind readjusts to whatever it is, and that becomes a norm of the pattern. And we seem to be built that way, scientifically proven. So that's where the thought came into play for what's going on right now. How many days have we been going into the supermarket and being able to afford less and less? How do you feel about that? Not right now. When you're actually looking at the prices, that's the key. That's the huge key. It's not what you're feeling right now. It's what were you feeling when you were going for the loaf of bread and saw that it was 25 cents higher? In that moment, what were you feeling? See, that's where manifestation and creation is. It's not us reflecting back on it and talking about it. It's in that moment where I'm going to buy a steak and realize it's 43 effing dollars for 2 steaks, or 1 if you're lucky. What are you feeling in that exact moment? That's now go 28 days, because this price hikes have been longer than 28 days. If a pattern is happening and is going longer than 28 days, that's where it becomes really mindful of how am I relating to it in that moment. And that doesn't really matter, in this example I'm using the price hikes for abundance, but that can also go into relationships where I accept someone in my life that's not treating me like I would like to be treated. And I allow them to be in my life longer than 28 days. So with every interaction that I have with them, and I'm accepting being treated less than what I really think I am, by the end of 28 days, does the way that they're treating me become normal? And I no longer have those expectations of the way I should be treated, because I've created a habit of what the relationship really is. Because if the mind in 28 days creates a habit and now calls it normal, well, now you have an argument to make in court. Because you could say what you think you deserve and what you are, but you've created a habit that says otherwise. And so you can look at it from the tail end of the 28 days, but that's not where the power is. The power is in that moment when you're interacting with whatever it is you're interacting with. So here are some of the exercises that she gave me to take a peek and see, how are you really manifesting your abundance right now? How are you really going ahead and dealing with these price hikes and money getting thinner and thinner? Are we accidentally, from not being mindful, impounding the problem by restricting our abundance? One of the exercises that she gave me was to save up and have $100 in your pocket, in your wallet at all times, or your purse. It's not to spend. It's not the purpose to spend it. The purpose is that you don't need to. The purpose of it is to be there to remind you. Now, when you're sitting there in front of what needs to be bought at the supermarket, be mindful. Realistically, we're not all buying top shelf items anymore. You know, the households in America are drifting towards the cheapies. So we're getting past the name brands and getting the non-name brands, which there's a stigmatism with that because, in a supermarket, or it's like going to school when you're a kid with the unnamed jeans instead of the name jeans. And keep in mind, my childhood was up around the 80s, so we were the age of opulence. Everything had to be name brand. But either way, it creates a certain stigmatism, whatever that is for your generation. So, but whatever it is, when you're looking at going ahead and buying it and having to make choices of okay, I won't get this cut of steak of beef, but I'll get this one because it's more affordable. Stop. Right there in that moment. And be mindful and observe, what are you feeling? Is that a choice or is that a degradation? Do you see the difference? When you're standing there and actually having to go ahead and make that choice, how do you feel about that? It's not the logic. You know you have to buy cheaper just to make the money stretch. And we're not getting to all the reasons for the price hikes, and not the point of the conversation right here, right now. How do you feel in that moment when your hand has to go from what you normally buy and go 2 grades down of steak quality or whatever it is that you're buying to pick up and put in a cart? Is that an uplifting feeling? Is that a choice of, to better spend my money? I'm making this choice? Or is that I'm being forced to? I can't afford. I'm feeling insecure because I keep having to do this and it's getting worse. Where are you in that moment? The $100 in your wallet is to remind you that you have the cash to afford that good steak or whatever it is that you're buying. You can tell I'm kind of steak obsessed. But whatever it is that you're buying, and you have to make that choice in that moment, and that energy comes up like we've been trained to, that you're not good enough because, and those are words, but what we actually deal with in that moment is a feeling. It's a sense of being, an important one. It's not just a feeling, it's a sense of being. So in that moment where you're making that choice and feel like I'm being forced to, stop and observe it. Don't try to change it. Stop and observe it. And what you'll find in that moment is that there's that feeling of however that comes for you, resentment. I'm not good enough. I'm being taken advantage of. I failed. I have to do this again. I thought I'd never be here again. There's a plethora of expressiveness there. But behind that is a state of being. It goes into a state of knowing. And after 28 days, what do you get? You get a rewiring of energy of being in the way that it manifests through your vehicle. And the perceptions change according to that. The thoughts, the feelings, the experience you're creating. Be careful what you create. But the first step is observing it. And when you observe it and you see that it's not an abundant feeling, it's not about having more, the $100 in the pocket is there to go ahead and remind you, I can afford it. I can afford it. but I'd like to go out to eat with the friends, which is coming up next weekend. I'm going to choose this so that I can afford to do that. I'm empowering myself. I'm making a choice. I can afford it, but I choose not to at this point in time. Do you feel the difference? And that doesn't address the overall issue that all of us are going through major budget cuts, trying to figure out how to deal with these higher prices, and separate video. And it's not even appropriate for what it is that I do. You know, that's a horse of a different color. But in this focus, look at what it is that you're actually experiencing in that moment. Try the exercise. Because you could say, I can afford it, but if you don't actually have the physical cash in hand, your mind knows you're lying. Because if you could afford it, you'd have the money in your pocket, but I don't have the money in my pocket. So save up and put $100 in the wallet or the purse, and as you go through, observe as you shop. What are the feelings? What are you doing in the moment? Not that you're exhausted after you leave the store. In that moment, you're choosing. What is your mind telling yourself? What are you being? And remind yourself, I can afford that. I'm making a choice so I can do this instead, which redirects that energy away. It doesn't change the fact of what we have to deal with or what we should be dealing with, but it leaves you in a healthier state. One more technique that she taught me, and this one will be a little bit outmoded because, you know, this is before everything was paid online. But she went ahead and told me that when you pay your bills, again, observe how you're paying your bills. Are you paying that bill with that feeling that I have to do this, I'm being taken advantage of, I don't have enough? And it's not so simple as going ahead of just applying those words in that moment. It's a feeling. What are you feeling when you go through and pay that bill? Is it with fear? Is fear there? Doubt? Insecurity? Questioning? Do you feel like the services you're paying for isn't worth the money they're asking, so you're resentful? How do you deal with that? And one of the techniques that she taught me is to break that cycle, that I'm going to put it into checks and then I'll transform it into modern day. Every check that I had to write out to a bill, in the memo line, she taught me to write, thank you. Thank you. Because I'm thanking you for your services, and I'm paying you for a fair amount for those services. So say thank you. Which changes the energy of paying the bill to one of gratefulness. And you could say, I pay my bills in gratefulness. I always do everything in gratefulness. The act of writing thank you changes it to an actual physical activity, not a mental one. It's not enough to make it mental. It's got to be physical. So if you have to open up your wallet and stroke that $100 bill, that's physical. You know that it's there. You know you're not spending it. You know that you can afford it, but you choose not to. There's a difference. When you write thank you, it's not in your head, I'm grateful. Are you grateful? Write thank you. I mean it. Thank you for your services. Thank you for what you've done for my household this year. Here's your payment for this month. And granted, there's a lot of things going on right now with price hikes that becomes saying thank you gets harder and harder to swallow. I'm human, I understand. But at the same time, when you say thank you, you're actually taking the physical action to put that gratitude in play, and in that moment, experiencing that thank you for your services, which is completely different than saying, well, I act with an acceptance and a gratefulness in the universe. How exactly? Because if you're not aware and observing what you're doing in that moment when you're spending that money on that bill, it doesn't matter what you say afterwards. It doesn't matter how you feel afterwards. In that moment, which is how we create and the universe responds to our state of being, we weren't. So say thank you. Modernizing that, most things that you pay has that ability to go ahead and put in a memo. So in the memo space online, when you're paying that bill, say thank you. Thank you for your services. And include that gratefulness in the same moment that you're actually creating the problem. And it directly counters the poison. Which then afterwards, you feel abundant. You know that you're abundant. You're experiencing that abundant. So thought for the day is take a look at what's going on with, how we're spending our money and actually dealing with all of these changes of price hikes, and observe what's the real truth. When my hand goes out to pick what it is that I'm going to put in my cart, what am I actually being? What am I actually experiencing? And try the technique for the $100 in the wallet or the purse. If you come up with another one, it doesn't matter. It's not the form, it's the intention. And again, it can't be something in your head. The body doesn't react that way. It reacts to physicality as the anchor. So you can't say, I have abundance. You do you? Then where's the extra money in your purse? Where's the extra money in your wallet? That's actual abundance. That's what the body responds to. We don't respond to, I'm hungry. Well, I'm thinking of a steak dinner, so therefore I'm full. No, you got to put something in your mouth. It's the way hunger works. It's the point. It needs something physical. Manifestation works the same way. So however that you want to do that, it doesn't have to be 100. It could just be a 20. Because believe it or not, that's what I started with. I started with a $20 and then worked my way up to 100. And then did that with my bank account. That there was $20 extra that I didn't spend. So that when I got down to zero, I knew there was still $20 there. And then I increased it to 40. So on and so forth until I got to $1,000. And still to today, I usually have $1,000 in my bank account that just sits there. And something can come up that I want. I know I can't afford it, but I'd rather not touch the $1,000. I'd rather just leave it be. That's, for emergencies. It's okay. I can afford that next month when I actually can pay for it outright. And so take a look at the abundance of where you're at with everything going on, and consider, that if you're using a technique, that in order to feel okay in the present, and you're reflecting on things that happened in the past, and the budget crisis is pushing those buttons, and you are projecting what you're going to be in the future as a resolve, that's an illusion, darling. That doesn't work. You can envision it, but unless you're connected to the knowing, where it's in the moment, experiencing it, and not from an intellectual level, you have to be able to have that higher self connected to you to really make that magic work. A more simpler technique is in the moment. As you're going shopping, as you're paying your bills, and watch the energetic changes of how you feel more relaxed, how you feel, no, I got this, it's okay. And, instead of having a constant becoming more and more fearful. So give a check and see how you're doing. thought for the day. Hopefully that helps, guys.